Do you remember coming home from school to something Mom whipped up on the stove? No box, no wrapper, just made? The 1970s. Kitchen ran on simple ingredients and a little imagination. Today we're sharing 25 forgotten homemade snacks that almost nobody makes anymore, and every one of them will take you right back. Let's start with ants on a log. If you grew up in the 70s, you knew exactly what this was the moment you saw it on the kitchen counter. A stalk of celery split down the middle, filled with a thick stripe of creamy peanut butter and topped with a neat row of raisins marching down the length of it. That was the whole thing. No recipe card required. Moms loved it because it was cheap. It had something resembling a vegetable in it, and it kept little hands busy on a long afternoon. Kids loved it because you got to eat peanut butter off the spoon while you made it. A box of raisins ran about 39 cents, and a jar of Skippy or Jif stretched for weeks. It showed up in lunchboxes, at Cub Scout meetings, and on the snack table at every elementary school. Somewhere along the way, it quietly disappeared, replaced by squeeze pouches and snack packs. But back then, it was a tiny, edible craft project, and we devoured it. No bake cookies. Remember when the best cookies in the house never saw the inside of an oven? These chocolate, peanut butter, and oatmeal mounds were a 70s kitchen miracle. You boiled sugar, cocoa, butter, and milk in a saucepan, stirred in peanut butter, oats, and a splash of vanilla, then dropped spoonfuls onto a sheet of wax paper to set. The whole thing took maybe 10 minutes, and most of that was waiting for them to firm up. No oven, which made them perfect for hot summer afternoons when nobody wanted to heat up the kitchen. They went by 100 names depending on where you lived: preacher cookies, boiler cookies, cow patties, or just no bakes. Every family had a slightly different version scribbled on a stained index card. The trick was the boil too short, and they stayed gooey too long, and they turned to sand. When they came out just right, glossy and a little chewy, there was nothing better. Kids today microwave a mug cake and think they've invented something. Popcorn balls. These were a 70s institution, especially once the leaves started turning. You popped a big batch of corn on the stovetop, boiled up a syrup of sugar, corn syrup, and butter, sometimes tinted with food coloring or flavored with a packet of Jell-O, then poured it over the popcorn and shaped the sticky mess into balls with buttered hands. The trick was working fast before it hardened, and burning your fingertips was practically part of the recipe. Back in the day, plenty of neighbors handed these out at Halloween, individually wrapped in wax paper twisted at the ends. Imagine that homemade treats from people down the street, and nobody thought twice about it. That trust faded over the years, and so did the popcorn ball. They also turned up at fall festivals and church bazaars, stacked in pyramids on card tables. Making them was a family event, everyone shaping while Mom poured. They were sweet, crunchy, and impossible to eat neatly. You just don't see them anymore. Watergate salad. Now, here's one with a name straight out of the headlines. This pale green concoction showed up at potlucks all over America in the mid-70s, right around the time the country couldn't stop talking about a certain scandal. The recipe was almost too easy. A box of pistachio instant pudding mix, a can of crushed pineapple with the juice, a tub of Cool Whip, a handful of miniature marshmallows, and some chopped pecans, all folded together and chilled. Jell-O brand pistachio pudding arrived around 1976, and the so-called salad spread like wildfire from there. Was it a salad? Was it a dessert? Nobody could say, and nobody cared. It went into a big glass bowl and got passed down the table at every family reunion and church supper. That's right, we called marshmallows and whipped topping a salad and set it right next to the green beans. It was cool, creamy, and a little bit silly, and we loved every bite. Ambrosia salad. Speaking of things we called salad, Ambrosia was the queen of them all. The name means food of the gods, and in the 70s, that apparently meant canned fruit and marshmallows. The classic version layered shredded coconut, mandarin orange segments, canned pineapple, and little marshmallows all bound together with sour cream or Cool Whip. Fancier families tossed in maraschino cherries or chopped pecans for good measure. It went back generations, but it hit its peak on 70s holiday tables, glistening in a cut glass bowl right between the turkey and the rolls. Every grandmother had her own version, and every one of them swore hers was the right one. It was sweet enough to be dessert, but it sat proudly in the salad lineup, and nobody questioned it. The coconut gave it that chew, the oranges gave it that little burst, and the marshmallows just melted into the whole thing. You rarely see it now outside an old family gathering, but one spoonful brings the whole decade back. Stuffed celery. Before fancy appetizers took over, there was the humble stuffed celery stick, and it was a fixture at every 70s get-together. The idea was simple. You took crisp celery stalks, cut them into bite-sized lengths, and filled the groove with something creamy. Sometimes it was plain cream cheese, sometimes pimento cheese spread, and in a lot of households it was cream cheese with a little blue cheese or some chopped olives folded in. The really old school version used that old English cheese spread from a jar. Mom would arrange them on a relish tray alongside carrot sticks, radishes, and black olives, and that tray came out for every holiday and every bridge game. It was crunchy, salty, and cool all at once, and it felt just a little bit fancy without costing much. Kids would sneak them off the tray before the guests even arrived. Somewhere along the way, the relish tray vanished, and stuffed celery went right along with it. Cheese ball. No 70s party was complete without a cheese ball sitting front and center on the snack table. This was the centerpiece, a big round mound of cream cheese mixed with shredded cheddar, a little Worcestershire, some grated onion, and whatever seasonings the recipe called for, all rolled into a ball and coated in a thick layer of chopped pecans or walnuts. Mom made it the night before so it could chill and firm up. It came surrounded by a fan of Ritz crackers, and you dig in with a butter knife, smearing it on and trying not to crack your cracker. Some folks shaped them like footballs during the season or rolled them in parsley for color. There was even a porcupine version studded with little pretzel sticks. Hard to believe, but a single cheese ball could anchor an entire evening of company. It was rich, sharp, and a little bit theatrical. The store-bought ones in plastic tubs never measured up to the real homemade thing. Lipton onion dip. Here's one almost every household knew by heart because the recipe was right there on the soup box. You emptied a packet of Lipton onion soup mix into a tub of sour cream, gave it a good stir, and let it sit in the fridge for an hour so the flavors could come together. That was it. They officially called it California dip, but nobody used that name. It was just onion dip. It came in the middle of a big bowl surrounded by a mountain of ruffles because only the ridged chips could stand up to a proper scoop. The dip showed up at card games, ball games on the TV, New Year's Eve, and every backyard cookout in between. That salty, oniony, creamy combination was downright addictive, and the bowl was always scraped clean by the end of the night. Did your family have a go-to dip like this for every single gathering? Tell us in the comments and tell us what part of the country you grew up in. cocktail weenies. Moving on to the appetizer that ruled the 70s cocktail party. Those little smokies swimming in a sweet and tangy sauce. The recipe couldn't have been easier, and that was the beauty of it. You dumped a jar of grape jelly and a bottle of chili sauce into a pot, or even better, a crock pot, stirred until it melted into a glossy glaze, then added a couple packages of little cocktail sausages and let them simmer. The slow cooker was the secret weapon because it kept them warm all night long while guests speared them with frilled toothpicks. That's right, grape jelly and chili sauce, a combination that sounds wrong and tastes absolutely right. Some families use barbecue sauce instead, and the great jelly versus barbecue debate raged in kitchens across the country. They were sweet, savory, and just messy enough to need a cocktail napkin. Sitting in their crock pot on the counter, they were usually the first thing to disappear at any holiday party. Rumaki. Now we're getting into the exotic side of 70s entertaining. Rumaki was a holdover from the tiki craze that swept the country, a little bundle of mystery and flavor that made any party feel sophisticated. You took a water chestnut, sometimes with a slice of chicken liver, wrapped it in a strip of bacon, secured it with a toothpick, and broiled or baked it until the bacon turned crisp. A lot of cooks marinated the bundles in soy sauce, brown sugar, and ginger, first for that sweet and salty Polynesian flavor. It sounded fancy and a little daring, and it tasted like nothing else on the table. Back then, hosts wanted their parties to feel like a trip to a faraway place, and Rumaki delivered that with every crunchy, smoky bite. The water chestnut gave it a surprising snap right in the center. As the tiki trim faded into the 80s, Rumaki quietly slipped off the menu, and most people under 50 have never even heard the word. Deviled eggs. And who could forget deviled eggs, the one dish that traveled to every single event in the 70s. Funerals, christenings, 4th of July picnics, it didn't matter. Somebody always showed up with a plate of them. You boiled the eggs, sliced them in half, popped out the yolks, and mashed them with mayonnaise, a little mustard, and a splash of pickle juice or vinegar, then spooned or piped the filling back in. A sprinkle of paprika on top was practically the law. The real status symbol was the special deviled egg plate, a dish with little egg-shaped wells to hold them in place, and a lot of homes had one tucked in the cupboard just for this. Making them was fiddly work, and there were always a few that cracked or wouldn't peel clean, so the cook got to eat the rejects. Deviled eggs never fully disappeared, but the homemade, paprika-dusted, carried in on a special plate version is getting rarer every year. Pigs in a blanket. These little wrap sausages were pure 70s fun, and they pulled double duty as both a party snack and an after-school treat. The grown-up version used cocktail sausages or pieces of hot dog rolled up in store-bought crescent roll dough, then baked until golden and puffy. Pillsbury crescent rolls in that pop-open tube made it almost effortless, and kids loved the loud pop when you opened the can. You served them hot with a little bowl of mustard or ketchup for dipping, and they vanished in minutes. Some folks wrapped Vienna sausages from the can, others used breakfast links, and a few fancy households even tucked in a sliver of cheese. They were warm, flaky, and just the right size for popping in your mouth whole. There was something deeply satisfying about that soft bread wrapped around a savory little sausage. You can still find them, but the homemade, made from a tube, served on a holiday afternoon kind feels like a memory from another time. Snickerdoodles, with a name that funny, Snickerdoodles were impossible to forget. These soft, chewy cinnamon sugar cookies were a 70s kitchen staple, the kind of thing a mom made on an ordinary Tuesday just because. What set them apart from a plain sugar cookie was that crackly top, the roll in cinnamon sugar before baking, and a secret ingredient, cream of tartar, which gave them their signature tang and chew. The dough came together with pantry basics, butter, sugar, eggs, flour, and that little jar of cream of tartar that seemed to exist only for this one recipe. The whole house filled with the smell of cinnamon as they baked, and you could never wait for them to cool. Nobody quite agreed on where the silly name came from, and nobody cared. They came in lunch boxes, on cooling racks by the dozen, and onto every holiday cookie plate. Warm from the oven with a cold glass of milk, a Snickerdoodle was about as good as an afternoon could get. If these are bringing the memories flooding back, you are exactly who we make these for. Do us one small favor and subscribe, so the next trip down memory lane finds you. That is all we ask. Now, back to it. Buckeyes. Next up are Buckeyes, those irresistible peanut butter balls dipped in chocolate that look just like the nut from the Ohio Buckeye tree. The recipe mixed creamy peanut butter with powdered sugar, butter, and a little vanilla, rolled into balls and chilled until firm. Then came the fun part, spearing each one with a toothpick and dipping it most of the way into melted chocolate, leaving a little circle of peanut butter peeking out the top to get that authentic Buckeye look. They were a Midwestern Christmas tradition, especially in Ohio, but they spread far and wide because they were so good. Making a batch was an all-afternoon project, and the counter would be covered in wax paper lined with rows of them setting up. That sweet, salty, peanut buttery center wrapped in chocolate was hard to beat, and it was almost impossible to eat just one. They turned up on every holiday cookie tray, and a tin of homemade Buckeyes was a gift that always made people smile. Divinity. Here's one that separated the patient cooks from the rest of us. Divinity was a soft, white, melt-in-your-mouth candy that took real skill and a good candy thermometer to get right. You boiled sugar, corn syrup, and water to just the right temperature, then slowly poured that hot syrup into stiffly beaten egg whites while the mixer ran, beating until the whole thing thickened and lost its gloss. Folks usually stirred in chopped pecans at the end and dropped spoonfuls onto wax paper to set. Here's the catch. You couldn't make Divinity on a humid or rainy day because the moisture in the air would keep it from setting, leaving you with a sticky puddle instead. That's right, the weather could ruin your candy. Grandmothers guarded their Divinity recipes and their timing like treasures, and getting a batch just right was a genuine point of pride. It was a holiday classic, sweet and almost cloud-like. Few people make it today because it simply takes more patience than most of us have anymore. Haystacks. Now here's a no-bake treat that was as fun to make as it was to eat. Haystacks got their name because they looked just like little piles of hay, and they came together in minutes. You melted butterscotch chips, sometimes with a spoonful of peanut butter, then stirred in crunchy chow, noodles until every strand was coated, and dropped little clusters onto wax paper to harden. Some versions use mini marshmallows or a handful of peanuts mixed in. The butterscotch and the crispy noodles made a sweet, salty, crunchy bite that was completely addictive. They were a favorite for church functions and school bake sales, and they were one of the first things a kid could make with just a little supervision. Believe it or not, chow meant noodles in a candy, and it worked beautifully. They sat in a bowl on the counter and disappeared one cluster at a time. Simple, sweet, and a little bit clever, Haystacks were a 70s snack that somehow slipped right off the radar. Homemade granola. The 70s were the golden age of the health food movement, and nothing said wholesome quite like a batch of homemade granola. As natural foods caught on, families everywhere started baking their own, mixing rolled oats with honey, vegetable oil, brown sugar, coconut, wheat germ, and chopped nuts, then toasting it all in the oven until golden and crunchy. The whole house smelled like honey and warm oats. People stirred in raisins, sunflower seeds, or dried fruit and ate it by the bowl with milk or sprinkled over yogurt. It felt healthy and a little bit hippie, part of a whole back to nature wave that had folks baking their own bread and sprouting beans on the windowsill. Making your own meant you knew exactly what went into it, and it cost a fraction of the boxed stuff that started showing up later. It was hearty, sweet, and satisfying. Were you a granola and yogurt household, or did your family think it was just a passing fad? Be honest, let us know down below. Gorp. Speaking of the great outdoors, here's a snack that came right out of the 70s. Camping and backpacking boom. Gorp, which old-timers will tell you stood for good old raisins and peanuts, was the original trail mix, and nearly every family made their own. You grab a big bowl and toss in peanuts, raisins, and a handful of M&Ms because the candy gave you quick energy on the trail, or so everyone said. From there, the variations were endless. Sunflower seeds, banana chips, dried fruit, pretzels, or whatever was in the cupboard. Mom would mix up a giant batch and portion it into sandwich baggies for hikes, road trips, and scout outings. It was the perfect grab-and-go snack long before anyone sold it in shiny packages. That little baggie of sweet, salty, crunchy bites kept many a kid going on a long afternoon. Today, the stores are full of fancy trail mixes, but the homemade baggie of Gorp, scooped from a bowl on the counter, was a simple 70s pleasure. Monkey bread. Here's one that turned breakfast into pure fun. Monkey bread was a sticky, gooey, pull-apart treat that became wildly popular in 70s kitchens. The shortcut version, the one most of us remember, started with refrigerated biscuit dough, cut into pieces, rolled in cinnamon sugar, layered in a bundt pan, and drenched in a butter and brown sugar syrup before baking. When it came out, you flipped it onto a plate and watched the caramel drip down the sides. The best part was that you didn't need a fork or a knife. You just pulled off one sticky, sugary piece at a time with your fingers, which is supposedly how it got its name. It was a hit at brunches and holiday mornings, and kids couldn't resist sneaking pieces off the edges. Warm, sweet, and impossibly sticky, it left everyone with caramel on their fingers and a smile on their face. It was messy in the best possible way, and a pan of it never lasted long on a Saturday morning. Magic cookie bars. These went by a few names: 7-layer bars, Hello Dollies, or Magic bars, but whatever you called them, they were a 70s dessert table favorite. The recipe was famous for being almost foolproof, and it was printed right on the can of Eagle brand sweetened condensed milk. You started with a graham cracker crumb crust pressed into a pan, then layered on chocolate chips, butterscotch chips, shredded coconut, and chopped nuts. The magic was pouring a whole can of sweetened condensed milk over the top, which baked down and held the entire thing together into a chewy, gooey, decadent bar. There was no mixing bowl required. You just built it in layers and let the oven do the work. That sweet, rich combination of chocolate, coconut, and caramelized condensed milk was downright irresistible. They were a staple at potlucks, bake sales, and holiday cookie swaps, cut into little squares because they were so rich. One pan made plenty, and they always disappeared fast. Frozen banana pops. When summer rolled around in the 70s, frozen banana pops were a homemade way to beat the heat. The idea was simple and a little bit magical to a kid. You peeled a banana, pushed a popsicle stick or even a sturdy fork into one end and froze it solid. For the deluxe version, you dipped the frozen banana in melted chocolate, which hardened into a shell the second it hit the cold fruit, then rolled it in chopped peanuts or sprinkles before the chocolate set. It was part snack, part craft project, and all fun. Moms loved that it was mostly just fruit, and kids loved that it tasted like a treat from the ice cream man. You pull one out of the freezer, wrapped in foil, and eat it out on the porch step on a hot day. That cold, creamy banana under a crackly chocolate shell was a simple pleasure. Store freezers are full of fancy frozen novelties now, but the homemade banana pop was a 70s summer staple. Homemade popsicles. Before the freezer aisle was packed with every flavor imaginable, kids made their own popsicles at home, and it was half the fun of summer. The classic method was to mix up a pitcher of Kool-Aid, extra sweet, and pour it into one of those plastic popsicle molds with the colorful pull-out sticks that every family seemed to own. If you didn't have the molds, you used ice cube trays with toothpicks, or you froze the Kool-Aid in little Dixie cups and ate it with a spoon as it melted. Some moms got creative and froze orange juice, leftover fruit punch, or even pudding for a creamier pop. The hardest part was waiting, and more than one impatient kid pulled the stick out too early and ended up drinking a slushy mess. Those bright, sugary, homemade pops stained your tongue red or purple and dripped down your wrist in the sun. They cost almost nothing to make, and on a hot afternoon, they were absolutely perfect. Cinnamon toast, or here's a snack so simple that almost every 70s kid could make it themselves, and most of us did. You toasted a slice of white bread, spread it with butter while it was still warm so it soaked right in, then sprinkled it generously with a mix of cinnamon and sugar. The really dedicated among us would pop it back under the broiler for a few seconds to melt the topping into a sweet, crackly crust. Some families kept a special shaker of cinnamon sugar mixed up and ready in the cupboard just for this. It was the perfect after-school snack, the kind of thing you whipped up in 2 minutes when you got home and were starving before dinner. Wonder Bread made the ideal canvas, soft and pillowy under all that butter and sugar. It was warm, sweet, and comforting, and it cost next to nothing. Which one of these would you make again tomorrow if you could? We read every single comment. Sausage balls. Now here's a savory snack that anchored 70s, brunches, and holiday mornings. Sausage balls were a magical little mixture of just 3 main ingredients: bulk pork, sausage, shredded sharp cheddar, cheese, and biscuit baking mix, all worked together by hand and rolled into bite-sized balls before baking. They came out of the oven golden brown, savory, and a little bit crispy on the outside, and people popped them like popcorn. The recipe was a fixture in community cookbooks and on the back of the biscuit box, and everybody seemed to have a slightly different ratio they swore by. They were perfect for Christmas morning while opening presents, for tailgates, and for any party that needed something hot and hearty. You could mix them up the night before and bake them off fresh. That combination of spicy sausage and sharp cheese in a tender biscuit-like bite was downright addictive. A tray of warm sausage balls never lasted long, and they were always one of the first things gone. Pickle roll-ups. We'll finish with one that sounds strange today, but was a beloved party staple back then, the pickle roll-up. The method was simple and a little bit genius. You took a slice of deli ham, spread it with a thin layer of cream cheese, laid a whole dill pickle spear along one edge, and rolled the whole thing up tight. Then you chilled it and sliced it crosswise into little pinwheels, each one showing off a green pickle center ringed in white cream cheese and pink ham. They were salty, tangy, creamy, and crunchy all in one bite, and they had a way of disappearing off the relish tray fast. Some folks used dried beef instead of ham, and a few added a dash of Worcestershire to the cream cheese. They were a fixture at card parties, holiday spreads, and ladies' luncheons all across the country. That unlikely combination just worked. Like so many things on this list, the pickle roll-up has mostly faded away, but it was a true taste of the 70s. Next time, the topic is yours. So tell us down in the comments what you want us to bring back next, whether it's the food, the toys, the music, or the places we used to go. The comment with the most likes is the one we turn into the next video. And don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss it when it lands.